So, we just spoke a little bit about Bentham's utilitarianism and about how those calculations work. And I want to just illustrate to you that Bentham really meant this. He really, really meant that all pleasures were the same, right? So that he's alive during the Victorian era of London. And you would see homeless people, homeless children. This is during a time period in English history where people were moving into the city because they were literally being forced off of their land, and they were forced to move in the city to try to get a job. There's not enough jobs, there's not enough homes. They were living on the street. And Bentham said, look, these people, these poor people, they don't have jobs, they don't have food, they don't have a shelter. That's bad for them. That gives them pain, so it's bad for them. Right? And then when you're walking down the street and you have a home, you have a job, you're just fine, and you have to see these homeless people and look at them, and that's gross and icky, and it causes you discomfort, that's bad for you, right? And it's the exact same type of bad. It's pain, and pain is pain, according to Bentham, right? So if we were to find a way to get these people off the street and into a job, into a home, right, their pleasure would increase. And if you didn't have to look at their ugly faces, your pleasure would be increased, right? So everyone's pleasure is going up. So we need to do something about this. And keep in mind, the pleasure that you get when you don't have to look at them is the same type of pleasure they get when they're not homeless. So what should we do with all these poor people? All right. Again, they're poor and unhappy about it. They feel better to be working and fed. Everyone who's not poor will no longer have to look at them. All right, the calculus is really working out, right? So what do? Right, we should put them in workhouses. Workhouses are slavery with extra steps, right? You get ordered to go to workhouse. You have to work in that workhouse. You have to live where they tell you to live. You have to do what they tell you to do. Why? Well, they'd have a job. They'd have somewhere to work, and you won't have to look at them. He thought this was the best option, right? Slavery, not a problem, right? Because your pleasure is increasing, right? Bentham really argued for enforcing laws to put poor people into workhouses for these reasons. And again, workhouses are just slave houses. He just didn't think that people had rights, right? What mattered was whether or not they had pleasure and the absence of pain, right? This is what he said. Natural rights is simple nonsense. Natural and imprescriptible rights, rhetorical nonsense, nonsense upon stilts. This is the equivalent of going, point to you in yourself where the rights are. You can't. And he says, point to you where the pain is. You probably can. Point to you where the pleasure is. You can, right? That's the point that Bentham is making. And he's saying, look, you can't compare rights, but you can compare pleasure and pain. Pleasure is better than pain, so pleasure is a good outcome. That makes an action just, as that it increases pleasure, right? We don't care about rights because they're nonsense, right? But we do know that people can suffer and people can feel pleasure. So we should go for making people feel pleasure. That's what's going on here. You don't have to worry about the incompatibility with libertarianism, but I do want to point out that as it stands, consequentialism, utilitarian, both this view and the one that we're going to look at next, they're incompatible, inconsistent with deontic views like Kantian deontology, divine command theory, and libertarianism. They're also inconsistent with virtue theory, okay? Because what's driving justice in the two cases are different. In this case, it's outcomes. In virtue theory, it's whether or not the motivations and the capacity are there for the act to be virtuous. We'll talk about that more, but I just want to point out these views are incompatible.